think maybe part of that was, the prudent upbringing of like, tech stuff comes and goes, but, building bridges, laying concrete, building culverts really never changes. And I think that was the foresight, was job security at the time. Like, I don't know. I think I just got lucky, right? Because like I started in my 20s. I was already kind of frugal, and I just happened to put my money in the right places, which was real estate. And it wasn't I'm not a huge fan of flipping houses, all these burst strategies. To me, that's what you do when you don't have money, right? I was just pure buy, hope, and pray model, where you buy stuff that cash flows. And then I later went into syndications where there's more value add, better deals. But I really contribute a lot to the beginning of like just being really frugal, saving at least 50 grand every year, and taking that money and putting into something that was pretty secure and also grew like a hockey stick.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 288. Hope everybody's having a great week. I know it's been a phenomenal weekend with all sorts of sports going on in my household with the kids and my little guy learning to ride his bike. And man, it is my birthday week, so that's a fun celebration. Been looking forward to this birthday for quite some time now. I'm turning 35, so excited for that. Got a lot of things planned this week as we head into the Easter season as well. Got to give a shout out to you listeners. I don't know what you did, but things have been rocking and rolling all of a sudden on Spotify, which is another place you can listen to the show if you're not listening to it there already, but have a subscription with them. Our downloads have skyrocketed on there, so appreciate that, and appreciate the interaction. We've had a couple people responding in on there, and some questions and some Q&A, some things with Spotify that I didn't even know existed. So appreciate that. Once again, too, you can go on our website, and if you want to ask a millionaire a question, we've got a little speak pipe that you can submit on there. We play it on the show, or you're also welcome to write in at millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. Always looking for new guests as well. If you're interested in being on the show, send us an email. We'll get you scheduled and get that rocking and rolling. I've got a couple reviews I wanted to read this week. Appreciate those that keep leaving those. Looking to try to get to our big goal, getting to 1,000 there by the end of the year. And it's the beginning of Q2 here, so looking towards that this quarter. It says, great insight into building wealth. This podcast delivers valuable wealth building information by talking to millionaires and diving into their wealth creation history. I especially enjoy hearing the ages at which levels of net worth were achieved. This podcast is unique in that it interviews everyday millionaires who are not looking to promote some book or podcast as so many other podcasts do. While my net worth is already $2.46 million, but I hope to be an interviewee someday with a higher net worth. I certainly have knowledge to share that mainstream wealth promoters don't acknowledge. And that's from Dan. Dan, we got to get you on the show. Send us an email. We'll interview you now, and then when you have a higher net worth as well. Got a couple of those, I think, in the pipeline. I have to go back and look at my notes, but I think we have a couple returning guests here pretty soon that we'll dive into and kind of look at where their levels have moved. We started this thing, gosh, it's almost been 6 years, 5.5 years. And so we've got some that we'll do a couple updates on. I know we've done a few in the past, but are going to try to do a couple more of those. We've had several requests for those. I also wanted to read this one. This has come from the K Scorekeeper. Learn how other people did it. Hear how ordinary people reach their $1 million. Host's wife should be a staple on the show. Her questions are spot on. Well, thank you for that. I will make sure my wife knows that she should be a staple on the show. She'll appreciate that. She was nervous doing a couple of those episodes. Maybe look at bringing her on more often. This week we have Lane. He has a net worth north of $10 million. 90% of it is in real estate. He started his career as a civil and industrial engineer and worked doing that for about 11 years while he was buying some rental properties. He started all that in 2009. By 2015, he had 11 units and then decided to trade in his 11 units for the big leagues and doing some syndications, investing with syndicators, and then became a syndicator himself, actually. So we get into all sorts of tidbits and nuggets with him. It's a great episode. Last week we had Rachel working in finance and accounting at a net worth of $1 million. Go check out that episode. That's 287. And without any further delay, let's get into the episode with Lane.
Lane, do you want to just give us a little about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, I guess, I kind of followed the linear path, like going to school, studying hard. I eventually became an engineer. Did that at University of Washington, worked up in Seattle for at least a dozen years. But, in parallel with that, I was buying little rental properties and just started to save $50,000, $100,000 a year and just plowed all that into rental properties. That was back in 2009. It was when I first bought my first property. And then in 2015, I had 11 of those suckers and they got pretty annoying to manage. At that point, I became more of an accredited investor and started to invest in private placements and syndications. And kind of living the passive investor life and no longer working that crummy engineering job that I really didn't like.
And what kind of engineer were you?
I was a civil engineer. Well, I eventually got a industrial engineering degree and then a master's in civil, but I was never really good at like designing stuff like most of the engineers. So, I did project management because you don't really need to know about much other than like checking your emails. So, I would manage construction projects, manage work crews, stuff like that. A lot of blue collar earthwork and construction. So people think because I was from Seattle, now living here in Hawaii, that I'm like a techie guy doing tech, but no, it's kind of good old fashioned civil engineering. And I think maybe part of that was, the prudent upbringing of like, tech stuff comes and goes, but, building bridges, laying concrete, building culverts really never changes. And I think that was the foresight, was job security at the time.
Interesting. And how long did you do that?
I graduated college 2007 and I eventually quit in 2018. But as I was doing that, of course, growing the real estate portfolio to eventually go FI, doing that. But I kind of stepped down. I started in private industry, low quality of life. And I kind of went more toward government jobs where, it's no secret. You don't need to do much at those jobs to get by. And then eventually, pieced out.
Interesting. I want to dig a little more deep into that, especially because I think you probably have a pretty unique background being a civil engineer and dealing with that, moving into real estate. I mean, some of those skills transfer over nicely. But before we dive into all that, what's your net worth today?
I mean, I was a little hesitant saying, and you and I talk, so let's just go with 8 figures and above.
Okay.
Today.
And the breakdown of that is what, 90%-ish real estate at this point?
Yeah. So I'm an entrepreneur. More specifically, a real estate syndicator. So we buy apartments or we develop, apartment buildings. So I am the general partner in that. So I am going to be more skewed to eating my own cooking and having my own skin in the game. So I would say 90% of my net worth is tied up in equity in my projects. The liquidity that I keep on the side to acquire land or kind of bail out a deal that's struggling along as a general partner is kept in my life insurance. If people are familiar with infinite banking, or what I call accredited investor banking, is how I kind of do it. That's kind of where I keep the cash value at hand to kind of be able to pull a loan from. And then, I'm starting to play around with, as my net worth has kind of gotten me to a point where I can get better security back line of credits, being more of a private client banking relationship, putting money in T-bills and JEPI for the main purpose of, now it's nice because you can get like 4% per month in the T-bills or 8% on JEPI, but more from a source of being able to do a security back line of credit for additional sources of liquidity there.
Yeah, man, we got some good stuff here. So let's back up here just a little bit. I want to go back. You got these rental properties, bought your first one in 2009. So timing wise, in hindsight, was pretty good. Were you buying about 1 to 2 or 3 of those a year?
Well, initially I was buying in Seattle, Washington, right, which is what I call a primary market, which not a lot of sophisticated investors buy in primary markets because the numbers don't work. Like we kind of look at this ratio called the 1% rent to value ratio, where the monthly rent needs to be 1% or higher of the purchase price. So like that first property I bought in 2009, I think it rented out for like $2,200 a month, but it was $350 was the purchase price, $350,000. That's less than 1%. You're not going to be able to cash flow on that. There's a lot of unsophisticated real estate investors who call that cash flowing because the rents pay the mortgage, but you got to include all the expenses and property management. You don't want to run that stuff by yourself. I was limited to how much money I could save. The next property I bought was a duplex in Seattle, Washington. Again, a little bit more crummier building, more of a B plus B asset, a little bit closer to the 1% ratio. But at that time, I was starting to realize that more sophisticated investors were going after better rent to value ratio properties for more cash flow, for more stability. And that was when I started to buy houses in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis. I'm sure a lot of the folks listening have been, hearing about like turnkey rentals. There's a lot of people who sell those types of things. I think it's a great thing for people under $250,000, $500,000 net worth to get started. But, as I quickly kind of phased out of that after buying 11 of those things.
So you bought turnkey ones as well?
Yeah. So I had 3 units up in Seattle. And then this was around 2012, 2013. I really started to buy more because I would start to sell the Seattle rentals. Part of that was appreciation too, which I don't, discount that.
1031?
But yeah, I 1031 from a couple of those properties to 9, adding that to a few others that I bought. So I had 11 rental properties. We can talk. I'm not a huge fan of 1031 exchanges. I don't know why people do them today with bonus depreciation, passive losses. We can get that later. But I basically transformed my portfolio from local rentals to out of state, to turnkey, totally remote. And then in 2015, I had 11 of those things. Each bringing in a few hundred bucks of passive cash flow a month. So $3,600 a month of passive cash flow, which is cool. But I don't know what American family can survive off of that. And, I had professional property management to run the thing, but, just to give people a glimpse at what the heck it's like to own 11 rental properties with property management. You're still dealing with 1 or 2 evictions a year, some kind of big catastrophe every quarter. And then you got to babysit your property manager, which is doable with 11 rentals. But if you're needing $10,000, $15,000 of passive cash flow a month, which is I think is the bare minimum for most American families, you're going to need damn near 30 of these rental properties. So, multiply the exception rate by 3. So eviction every other month and some kind of big catastrophe every other week. It's just not scalable. And that was kind of where I started to join different groups and find other accredited investors and kind of figure out what they do, right? After they become, unbroke under $1 million net worth.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So you get to that point, you've got 11 properties. Was there a certain thing or an event or a person you met that flipped that switch for you? Or was it just getting to that point where you're like, I can't manage the manager, I can't manage the evictions and all this stuff that's happening. It's just not scalable in my mind. I've got to figure something else out.
Yeah, it was 2 things. I mean, first was the pain point, which was, I think when you count it all up, I maybe had 9 evictions through that several year period, which people think is a lot, but it's really not that much. But the exception rate, 1 out of 3 of those evictions ended up to be some kind of huge repair bill. The people just trashed the property. I have video walkthroughs of trash properties that I put on YouTube just for kicks. And it's just you lose faith in humanity. A couple of the times the sheriff comes and throws all their crap out on the street. And it's first of all, that's why we buy properties in red states, right? When people can't pay, they can't stay. If people think that's unfair, that's not how I grew up. You got to pay to stay, right? You got to pay your rent. But people will trash the property on the way out. And then that only happened maybe 2 or 3 times where there was a $5,000 repair bill or a $15,000 or $20,000 repair bill. And then now I'm like, well, what the heck was this all for? I thought we were trying to make money with this. And so that was the pain point. That was the head scratcher. This isn't all sunshine and rainbows, what the turnkey providers told me what was going to happen in my so-called pro forma sheet. And that was about the same time I started to, by luck, build relationships with other purely passive accredited investors who were also ditching the little rental properties and going in as a passive investor into much larger deals, more secure deals ran by professionals, right? As opposed to, at the time, I was kind of just a mom and pop, investor. I just had some little rental properties. And then the aha moment became where, wow, the tax benefits when you do it this way, you're extracting bonus depreciation, you're using all your passive losses from these deals to offset your passive income and even your ordinary income. And then also how none of the debt gets put in your personal name, and, you know, just a lot more benefits that I was like, whoa, I got to sell my rental property. So, you know, as I started to go into these larger syndication deals, I was also kind of selling off my rental properties, not via 1031 exchange, but as I was going into deals, I was getting a huge amount of depreciation and offsetting those capital gains and depreciation recaptures. I was kind of making the transition.
Yeah. We'll get into the transition here in a second, but I want to go back to a comment you made that's interesting, and that's that you're not a really big fan of 1031s. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, 1031s is a tool to kind of defer your taxes. Too often, the tool is sold by a 1031 salesman, and oftentimes there's probably a better way that you can defer those taxes. And it's simply like understanding, like, I mean, from a nutshell, there's ordinary income, which is your W-2, 1099, and your passive income, your rental property gains, and or from syndications or things that come from K1 investments on your K1 form. The nice thing about real estate, you know, I'm not a huge fan of real estate, but what I like about it, and the reason I keep coming back to and why 90% of my portfolio is real estate, is it allows me to extract all these great paper losses from the depreciation of the property. And especially with syndications, you can do these things called cost segregations, where you just do this little report, or your syndicator, or we do it on behalf of our investors. We pay $5,000-$10,000 to do this cost segregation report. And this report allows us to drastically write off the asset a lot quicker, oftentimes getting 10, 20 times the amount of depreciation in the first year than somebody with their own little rental property on their own. And what this does is creates a great surplus and not only offset all your passive income, because again, passive losses offset passive income. But if you have a boatload of surplus, what do you do with it? Well, first of all, you knock out all your other passive income from all your other investments, but maybe you can also implement real estate professional status on your taxes. And, you know, this is what a lot of our doctors will do that make 600 grand. They'll strategically use passive losses to offset and lower their ordinary income from 600 down to $400,000, saving them 50 cents on every dollar, or 100 grand right there. And you can do this with real estate professional status, or if you get to a certain threshold, you know, you want to turn most of your assets into passive income. So it's all passive. You can use your passive losses to offset it. You know, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an attorney. And this is what I personally did for myself. Of course, you work with professionals to make this happen for you. But I think what kind of makes me real passionate about this is, like, I was once like a W-2 working slave. It's the middle class that pays all the taxes and works the hardest. It's not the wealthy doing these strategies, and it's not the poor people, but it's just about educating yourself on how the wealthy do things, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go back to another thing that you mentioned that's pretty unique. So you've got a whole life policy. When did you put that in place, and how do you utilize that as part of building your wealth?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do this kind of 3-step program. Like, first, investing in off-market alternative investment deals is number one. Number two is, you know, you invest in those deals to get passive losses to drastically lower your tax bill. Third is that infinite banking thing you mentioned. And I feel like most people geek on it too much, because quite honestly, it doesn't move the needle as much as the first two. But because you asked, you know, basically what you're doing is you're buying a whole life policy, not the ones that your friend from college is selling you, where most of it is insurance. What we try and do is we crank down the insurance to the bare minimum, because that's where the commissions come from. We don't want that. We just want this like insurance policy so we can add as much paid up additions, or what we call PUAs, so that we can kind of use it like a liquidity source. In a way, it's just like a HELOC, right? Like a HELOC, you buy your house just like you buy an insurance policy, but the HELOC, you're able to, like, just like you pay down your mortgage. Therefore, you can take a bigger loan from your HELOC. But this is superior because you own your whole life insurance policy, and you can load money in there via your paid up additions, and keep when you have a high amount of cash, you throw it in there. But ideally, for most working guys who, you know, doesn't have a company, or, you know, big up and downs in cash flow, or a big liquidity source need, like myself, you know, most guys will take a loan of most of or all of their money in cash value in their life insurance and go invest in deals, you know, or buy more assets, you know. as you always hear.
And when did you start employing that strategy?
I would say I started to do it in 2017. I just started with a small policy where I loaded up 50 grand every year. Kind of the old school method is like you have to pick like a 5-year, 7-year program. In my case, I put 50 grand in there for 5 to 7 years, which a lot of people are a little uncomfortable with. Like, you have to make a plan, and what happens if year 2 or 3, I can't put in the 50 grand or whatever I put in there. But there are programs now where you can kind of just quick load it, quick launch it all in the first year to kind of take the guesswork out of it, which works great for a lot of people who are brand new to alternative investing and want to cash out their 401ks because they kind of see the light in a lot of this and just want to reallocate it. So the game plan is, if you got a big liquidity source or you sold a house, you dump that into your infinite banking whole life insurance, then you take a cash value loan from it. But in the meantime, you're kind of making money in 2 places. You're double dipping. You're making about 4 or 5% in the life insurance, and you're able to kind of take loans from it and have it be a kind of a business expense. So it deduct the interest expense as a business owner. And then the nice thing is, for me, I use it as also a litigation kind of protection, because I'm sure a lot of people are aware, like when your money's in your 401k, it's sort of asset protected. Right? Insert the O.J. Simpson story, but no different. When your money's in your life insurance, it has a similar same litigation protection in there. So, what the wealthy will do is after their net worth become about 10, 20 million, they start to implement more exotic strategies like irrevocable trusts and stuff like that to get it completely out of their estate, out of their name for asset protection reasons. But it's a pain. So what's the best of both worlds? Or what's kind of an intermediary? Instead of getting it outside of the house, in a way, the infinite banking is kind of like keeping it in the patio undercover, right? It's got the asset protection, but it's not as untouched as completely taking it outside the house in a separate trust.
Yeah, for sure. So when you started this whole journey back in 2008-9, you're buying your first rentals. Why did you choose to invest in a single family home?
I was duped like everybody else. Everybody told me that the path to wealth building is buying the house to live in. For people who are under $1 million net worth, in fact, like I don't think you should buy your house until your net worth is 2 to 3 times greater than the value of the house, even if you're using debt, especially if you're using debt. Like to me, buying a house, the difference between rental property syndications and buying your house is the tenant is paying down your mortgage for you. You're making that revenue stream, and they're putting their heart, sweat, and tears in it. Where buying your house, I think, is one of the worst mistakes people make under $1 million net worth. Now, I get it. You don't want your spouse to divorce you. That also comes into play. But from a number standpoint, your money is better off cooking in several rental properties or in several syndications. How many roofs do you want? I mean, as long as you can pay the debt service on it comfortably, which is the main thing, it's better to go and buy rental properties, buy assets, more assets than to buy the property you're living in. But, I didn't know that. I just thought, and a part of it was ego. I was like, I want to be super fast to buy my house that I live in. But I bought it in 2009. And at the time I was traveling all over for work as a construction supervisor, only home on Friday and Saturday. And I was like, this is kind of silly, right? And for like a frugal 20-something-year-old, 22, 23-year-old, I was like, well, let me rent this thing out. So I got an old property manager from college who was kind of cool to us when we were renting, and just started to roll with that. And then I started to realize, whoa, I'm making a lot of beer money doing this. And I was like, whoa, if I just did this a few more times, I'll be able to create enough passive income to be able to quit my day job. At the time, I thought the idea was to pay off the properties. No, wealthy people don't do that. They don't pay off the properties, right? They buy more. And then maybe when your net worth gets to be about $5-10 million, you can think about deleveraging and paying off the debt. But as far as when I calculated how much I was making in these rental properties, I was like, why would I want to put my money in something making 8 to 10%, the stock market stuff, that's ordinary income? I want passive income and the passive losses from these investments to offset and pay less taxes, which is the kind of the second part of this big equation. But anyway, I I had a pretty good job where I was kind of like a corporate traveler guy, and I just didn't live anywhere for several years. So I was like saving like 100 G's every single year. Like there'd be months where I would spend like $100 out of my own, I don't know what they called it, wallet these back then. But yeah, all of it was just going to saving up for more and more rental properties. And this is like from like 2012 to 2015. It was just pretty extreme saving mode at that time.
How much were you legitimately living on? I mean, is it really only $100? Do you really basically have all of your expenses paid for and no living, just rented? Or were you basically like living in hotels?
Yeah, I was living in hotels. And then what I would do on Saturday to like, because I would technically be off duty, right? I would say like, I was doing work. I was working every day. So I would just not go home and just stay on the cruise site wherever you were and just kind of bridge that.
Wow.
I paid for like a storage locker. I had a storage locker. I would have to go check the PO box. Like it was definitely rambling, man, for sure. But like, today, like most of my clients, they make multiple six figures. And what I see, and all I ask them all the time, is like, look, I don't care what you make. I only care what your net is. What do you save at the end of the year? Most of these guys are saving 30 grand to 100 grand plus per year. But, without me doing this, I was, saving close to the best of them, right? With maybe half the amount of salary that these guys have.
Wow. So for a majority of your 20s, to some degree, I mean, you were definitely an anomaly. I mean, your peers were probably not living like you were.
Yeah, what girl wants to date you in your 20s, right? You don't really hit your stride until your 30s or 40s or until maybe you hit $1 million net worth. Just kind of joking,
yeah,
folks, right? But,
yeah.
But like, that I think maybe people listening, that's similar. Like I kind of enjoyed that, right? And I kind of struggle with that today, like getting rid of like the frugality. And it was kind of like things I could save money on. Like I really got off, and like it was kind of like scoring points every time I saved money, or I wasn't quite extreme couponer, but I would like definitely do a lot of weird things to like save money.
What was one of the weirdest things you did? Do you remember? Or is there something that comes to mind?
I wouldn't go to the car washes. I would just wash my car in the rain. I on my website, I have like a list of all these things. I think it's like simplepassivecashflow.com/cheapo, because I knew I would forget a lot of these things. But like, what's that pizza place where you make your whole, like, you can make your custom pizza? I don't know, something Mod Pizza, I guess.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Mod, or like Blaze.
Yeah, there's like a hack where like you can get the salad. Nobody ever gets the freaking salad, but if you get the salad, you get unlimited toppings for like $12. Probably now it's like $16 with inflation, because it was a long time ago. But that thing can feed you for like 4 days. So
you just get the salad and just load up on toppings and then save it.
Yeah, and then maybe if you run out of lettuce, you run into Safeway, get the 99-cent spinach bag or something like that. But yeah, I mean, now I look back at like, there's a point in time where money is more valuable than time.
Yeah.
But I feel like when your net worth hits $500,000, that's definitely the transition point. Or like, I mean, now I have, you've got young kids too, right? Like I've got like a almost 2-year-old. Now time is more important for sure. But yeah, like a lot of like, I don't know, I think I just got lucky, right? Because like I started in my 20s. I was already kind of frugal, and I just happened to put my money in the right places, which was real estate. And it wasn't I'm not a huge fan of flipping houses, all these burst strategies. To me, that's what you do when you don't have money, right? I was just pure buy, hope, and pray model, where you buy stuff that cash flows. And then I later went into syndications where there's more value add, better deals. But I really contribute a lot to the beginning of like just being really frugal, saving at least 50 grand every year, and taking that money and putting into something that was pretty secure and also grew like a hockey stick.
Yeah. Was there anything from your childhood that was critical into your, I guess, formative years that made you frugal, or was that just kind of how you naturally are?
I mean, I'm Asian, right? Like, I mean, just like any immigrants, you're taught to be pretty frugal. Like when we used to go to the restaurant, we don't order soft drinks. That's a ripoff. We order water, like suck it up, if you want a soft drink, smuggle it in your pocket. We would always bring our snacks to the movie theater. Like these are the things I remember. I also grew up in Hawaii and I live here now, but that's very Hawaii mindset. You don't like waste stuff. If you have one, you have none mentality. We save garbage bags, we save grocery bags because now you can't get them anymore. You don't give it out, so you save them. That's kind of the culture that I was kind of brought up in. Now I'm kind of like, as a wealthier person, like they say, like you got to figure out what your values are. Like for me, definitely one was like, don't waste stuff, right? It's food and money. It's fine to blow your money on things that you enjoy and like, but identify what is waste and what is value.
As you've gotten wealthier, is there something that you're more willing to spend money on that gives you back your time now?
Experiences for sure. The book Die with Zero, Bill Perkins.
Yeah, it's a great book.
He's been on the podcast, and like it's very much like I liked how he like separated the times. Like you may not be able to do everything from your 45th birthday to 50 and after that, but breaking up these bucket list items in their times, I see as a very good idea. And like, not, just definitely figuring out like, well, right, each kid is going to get, I don't know, $2 million each, whatever. But everything else, just spend it on experiences. I'm not huge hokey pokey on, what you do in the afterlife, what happens, this is all a ride or not. But just from a pure standpoint of like money as a tool, money magnifies who you are as a person. If you are the sum of your experiences. So however you want to do it. I interact with a lot of entrepreneurs who are a lot more on the income sheet side of the mindset. Wealthier people are more on the balance sheet side. But the thing I like about income sheet people is that they burn their money. They burn it. And they typically, they burn on stupid stuff for sure. But in there, they burn it on experiences. Where the balance sheet people tend to be more people who are achieving towards a numerical goal, like 10 million, 20 million, $50 million net worth, $100 million net worth. And it can turn into like this just constant like hunt for like the score, and when you're dead, nobody cares. Nobody puts that on your tombstone,
Is there an experience that you've had that's been one of your favorites?
I am still in the growth stage. I kind of loosely I'm 38 now. I kind of loosely have in my head that I may really start to pull things back when I'm 45 because health wise, I kind of feel like after the age of 50, things may trail off for me somewhat, right? Where I can do everything now that I can do when I'm 44, 45, maybe even 46. But I have that loosely in my head where I think I may want to kind of slow things down and really be more conscious of blowing money at that point. But yeah, I guess you're asking like a specific spend recently. I don't spend that much money. Like I maybe spend less than like $5,000 personally. I still rent my house because I think if I were to buy a house in Hawaii, it'd probably be $2 million. And then I would have to put down like $600,000, $800,000 for a down payment because you can't get a jumbo loan for multi-million-dollar houses. That's just, people don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That it makes more sense for me to rent. And, I'm a real estate entrepreneur. So I'm going to put every single $100,000 I got into a deal and grow it much faster than it will in a house, much to my wife's chagrin. But like, I don't spend that much money. The thing I bought lately was like, I have a Ford Raptor because I wanted one when I used to work construction because I thought that was cool. But other than that, a couple grand for car payments, $1,000, $2,000 for like daycare and food, and maybe a few $1,000s for rent. I'm definitely under 10 grand burn rate a month.
Wow. Even in Hawaii.
Yeah. My problem is my business. Like, we have a lot of staff, it's maybe, it's definitely 10, 20 times that number, but that's all on the business side.
Yeah. But in your personal life, you're spending 10 grand, 20 or 10 grand, 12 grand a month.
You said you're going to visit Hawaii, right? I think that's what I like about Hawaii. And that's why I moved away from the mainland, like Seattle in particular. Like it's such a pissing contest up there. Like people are like, oh, my Tesla, or like this Ferrari or whatever. Like in Hawaii, it's an easy place to kind of hide wealth. It really is. And if you kind of just put your head down, you don't have that keep up with the Joneses too much out here.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of like.
When you look out hit that goal at 45 to maybe go back or spend differently? Are you targeting an asset under management goal? Are you targeting a net worth goal? Are you targeting a passive income? I mean, I'm guessing from our conversation that your spending isn't going to go up that much more than it is now. So what changes at 45?
I mean, it's a long enough time that I can reposition. A lot of my net worth is in equity, which doesn't mean much. It's just fake money as far as I'm concerned, kind of like people's stock prices. Until you can translate that into monthly cash flow, it don't mean nothing. So my whole plan that I feel like I have at least 5 years to hit is, as my projects cash out, sell, instead of putting it into more and more deals and projects, which I've been doing since the last, 15 years or so, take it and put it into T-bills or JEPI, traditional investments where I can just make 4% on, and also get security backed line of credits to go buy more real estate too. But at that point, now it's coming out as cash flow. So something I've kind of really grasped upon a bunch of years ago is never spend the pile, but freely spend the spoils of the pile or the cash flow, right? For somebody like myself who gets really nervous about spending, my pile, something that worked for me maybe 4 years ago is like I put like 60 grand into an investment that gave me 12% every year or 1% every month, and it paid monthly. And if you did the math at home, that's like 600 something bucks, right, on that 60 grand. But that 600 bucks bought me, I think at the time, I had a little like Mercedes coupe or something like that. That paid the lease. But that for me was a big like aha moment. Like, hey, my investment was my principal was untouched. The 60 grand was untouched. And it was also going up with the pace of inflation too. But the cash flow that came from the investment, let's just blow that sucker, right? Just blow it. And we blew it on something I wanted, right? And to specifically call out needs, wants, and stupid stuff that you want. The goal is to get a certain amount, $25,000 of passive cash flow a month, with half of that, majority of that as wants. And to do that, all I got to do is divide that by, 0.05. I mean, 5%, 5%, 10% on 2 million, which is not too much money, is, 200 grand right there. That'll make most people happy at 20 grand a month of passive cash flow. That's a lot of beer money.
Yeah. So Lane, let's switch gears here just a little bit and get into syndication. So you've been doing these syndications for a little bit. How, if one were to invest in a syndication and with an operator and a sponsor, what are things that they should look at as they're evaluating, a deal and a sponsor?
Yeah, it's the complete Wild West, right? I mean, you go on Facebook or LinkedIn and you get all these random people, and it's real estate. It's all a relationship game, and everybody's going to tell you that they're the best. And they're on their website, they're going to say they did this, they did that. It's unverified private equity. And my golden rule is you never invest with somebody unless you know somebody personally that has invested with them in the past, which is hard in the beginning. Like, even I didn't know anybody personally that was an accredited investor when I first started. And I jumped into deals with fake it till you make it people, because there's a lot of them out there. So my tip is meet other purely passive accredited investors. That's why we have fun little retreats and games for people to play and meet each other. So to start that ecosystem for yourself. But if you want some quick tips, what I would do is I would go look up how much assets under ownership they own. I would say look for at least $1 billion of assets under ownership. I was like looking the other day at a Facebook ad, and like these suckers only had 660 million. Even 600 million is not that much. It sounds cool, but it really isn't that much. That would be the first step, to at least see you're working with somebody who's done $1 billion of assets under ownership. We've done 2.1 billion the last time we counted it, but I don't feel like we hit our stride. We didn't start to hire asset management professionals until we got about maybe $500 million of assets. But that's the first way, because it's an internet marketing game. This is real estate. Everybody has a cool, slick podcast and book and, website. The only real way to determine who's legit in this business is to build real relationships with real passive investors and go from there. That's really all I can kind of say about that. And part of that is it forces you to get outside your comfort zone, But this is the world of alternative investments. You have to huddle around other comrades, colleagues, to kind of make your way out into the minefield. Because there's a bunch of shysters out here, or fake it till you make it people. And I've invested with a handful of them in my past. But
have you ever lost money in a deal?
Yeah, handful of times. Every time this is what I call it, like it's the counterparty risk is what you're trying to mitigate from. When you're investing in real estate, especially stuff that's cash flowing, workforce housing, it's the nice thing about real estate, it's really hard to lose money from the investment. But when you lose money, most of the times it's through the counterparty risk, like the FTX debacle. That's counterparty risk. Somebody stealing money, doing dishonest stuff, commingling money the wrong way. That's counterparty risk. As far as risk coming from the actual operation of the investment, that's not too much of a risk. That's why you invest in real estate. That's why most people, when they make $5-10 million, they start to play defense and go into real estate at that point. Real estate's it's not a way to build ultimate quick wealth. Having your own business, yes. Saving for 20 years at $50,000, $100,000 a year will get you there. But real estate is more of a stable way of building wealth and keeping wealth, in my opinion. If you want to gamble with your money, you do crypto or Tesla stock and stuff like that. But I think real estate is a great way to keep it, and it also unlocks all these tax strategies when you start to get the passive activity losses and offset ordinary income and passive income. But as far as the risk, I think it's the counterparty risk, and that's why I say meet other purely passive accredited investors, build relationships with them.
What about when you're looking at an individual deal? So
most times the passive investors are never really given the information that you can even begin to make a good sound decision in. You're just given a bunch of a PDF pitch deck, everything that the broker sent the syndicator. It's kind of useless. To really do verification, you need to have access to CoStar, which costs $10,000, $20,000 a year to verify rents, and also walk the comps and walk the property, which most passive investors will never do, especially if you're investing in more than a dozen deals. Now, I have the ability, and the way I got started was getting the profit and loss statements for the last 2 years and the rent rolls. And I have an analyzer to underwrite the deal. But that goes outside the scope of passive investors. Most passive investors will bet on the jockey instead of the horse, is what they say. So doing your due diligence on the operator group, because in these private equity deals, most of the ways they're structured anyway is when passive investors win, the general partnership win. Either some profit split, there's alignment in the two parties. It is a partnership. It's essentially a JV in a simplistic form. But yeah, most passive investors that are accredited don't know too much about the investments. They understand the value of real estate. But I think at the very least, you look at the price per unit, and then you look at the average rents. That's a good place to start. But that might be the extent of the technical underwriting analysis.
Yeah. So you've said a couple of interesting things. One, that you like real estate, you've been in real estate, but you're also not think it's the only asset class, but because of tax strategies, you like it. Is there another asset class out there that you like that you would think is somewhat recession proof?
Yeah. I mean, this is what you do when your net worth goes over 5 mil, right? You start to take some chips off the table and you go into what's called non-correlated assets, non-correlated with the economy assets. Some of those things are like life settlement investments where you're kind of betting on people's life insurance or people kicking the bucket, which is kind of technically guaranteed to happen. But at this point, it's kind of like when you get past 5 million, you really need to look at your own personal consumption levels and what is your goal? What do you really need? Most people in my ecosystem, they're perfectly happy with 25 grand a month. So that is 4 million at 5%. That's easy to hit. But if you aspire to spend bigger than that, you're going to have to make an average of 5 to 10% plus with that. At that point, you may have to either stay with real estate and maybe focus on more stable investments like preferred equity, for example, is what a lot of high net worth investors will do. And they'll get out of the more riskier common equity LP placements. But yeah, I mean, I'll just, at that point, again, like this is why you need to plug into a group of people to get these ideas. I'll just personally say what I'm personally going to do. The next 10, 20 million I get, I'm going to start to build up my T-bill and JEPI collection where I can make, right now you can make 4% with the T-bills, 8, 9% with JEPI, paid monthly cash flow with that. And then I'm going to take, with the T-bills, I can take 90% of that as a loan at like SoFi +1 or something like that. Like it's a crazy interest rate. The T-bill or the JEPI, I think you can take up to like 50, at least 50% on the leverage on that. But I wouldn't tap the entire leverage, just to avoid a capital call. I would only I would have my money humming in those two things, but I would take a little loan, maybe 20, 30% on that, and maybe just go buy my personal residence with that cash, right? And that's a very low risk, low return investment. That's when you buy your house.
All right, Lane. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive meal out that you've paid for?
Ooh, I didn't pay for it, but we've done some pretty expensive omakase. I think they were on the scale of like 400 plus.
Okay.
I like the omakase. They're very it's more of an experience.
Yeah.
I put it in a category of experience.
For sure. What's the most expensive car that you've purchased?
My Ford Raptor. I mean, it's like $100,000.
Okay. What if you were to be a professor in college, which class would you teach?
Oh, I'm not a huge fan of colleges. I don't know. I mean, something with alternative investments, I guess, and not paying taxes.
Okay. What's a closely held belief that you've recently changed your mind on?
I thought that everybody should do real estate, private equity real estate forever. What I'm starting to realize is when your net worth is getting to be about $5-10 million net worth, or your today cash flow bucket is fulfilled, whether you're cool with $10,000 a month, $25,000, $50,000 a month, I think that's the inflection point. And this is well beyond you've gone FI or zero gravity, or your passive income has surpassed your daily consumption and your wine budget too. But I think at that point, it's the journey back to traditional investments, just in case you die, right? Like your kids may not have the relationships and connections that you have built up over the years, and they're more susceptible to that counterparty risk of investing with a shyster. I think that's the transition. But I have no doubt that it is really, really hard, unless you're super frugal and you don't spend any money on experiences, to get from $500,000 to $2 to $3 million net worth in less than 10, 20 years, unless you're investing in alternative investments. And the reason being is taxes. When you start to invest in alternative investments, typically your tax bill goes down by half. So it's kind of like flying from here, Texas to Hawaii. You're going 600 miles an hour. You can't go much faster than that. But if you can cut down the airspeed drag on you by half, you're going to get there in a heck of a lot less time. And that airspeed drag is kind of like taxes. And that's why alternative investments in real estate is kind of the chosen path. Like I don't see it possible to make it to Hawaii from Texas to Hawaii in less than 5 hours, unless you're not paying taxes, if I were to combine both of these analogies.
Yeah, for sure. What do you mean when you mention traditional investments? If you go through full cycle, what are you referring to there?
Yeah, traditional investments are all the crap that, the big brokerages, Vanguards, Fidelities, Morgan Stanleys, they want you to buy all their products, right? It's the stuff where you're supposedly making 5 to 10%. And I look back when I was early in my 20s, I'm like looking at my little dinky rental property where I didn't do any house flipping or pain in the ass stuff there, but I'm making like 20, 30% a year when you add in the tenants paying down my mortgage. So my equity built up there, the tax benefits of paying less taxes, the appreciation and the cash flow. It's like, who stole all my money, right? And it's the big brokerages, it's the traditional investment houses. And that's my big thing is like, get off of the traditional investments like REITs. REITs, yeah, you're investing in real estates, but you're investing through a bunch of middlemen in a REIT. Get more direct with the operator or do it yourself. Cut out all the middlemen. And it's not that hard. It takes a little bit of education, but like it's just frustrating because like Wall Street and all these big buildings, these banks are all taking a huge cut of everybody's investment winnings. And where you as an investment are taking all the risk. It's kind of messed up in my opinion.
Yeah. What piece of advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out, or maybe they're is in their 20s, or maybe they're in their 30s or 40s and is just starting out on their wealth building journey?
I mean, I work with people who have good paying jobs and specifically can save at least $20,000 a year. For people less than that, I'm not the guy to listen to. I'm probably the opposite you want to be listening to. I would probably say, well, go work on a personal finance budget. But I think for people on the other side of the paradigm, we're able to save $20, $50, $100,000 plus a year. You need to get more on the offense and using good debt to buy assets to get the tax benefits, to pay less taxes. Yeah. I mean, I guess like for the new guy, like that was where I started. I was fresh out of college. I made close to 6 figures and I was able to save at least 30 grand a year. That's go and buy a rental property to get started, buy a bunch, and you just have to like be patient and keep saving your money. But then when your net worth goes over $500,000, certainly when you become a credit investor, transition over to syndications and private placements and step up to the accredited investor world. Ride that to about $4 or $5 million net worth, get surrounded with other high net worth people. And by then you've probably made enough connections and, built enough knowledge base to kind of forge your own path from there. But I see that as kind of like the track to $5-10 million net worth.
Awesome. Remember, that's Lane with a net worth of 8 figures. Appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.